Chieftain Orag looked down upon the combined camp of elves and dwarves. It was unusual for the two races to work together on Danaan, but the strange circumstances were another reason he was able to demand such a high payment from the Rordian general for this raid. "Get ready, boys," Orag said to the throng of ogre berserkers that attended him. "Remember, we are the Avalanche. None can stand against us." The braves responded with predatory grins, and Orag began the assault. To the elves and dwarves of the camp below, it must have felt like an earthquake as the giant steps of the ogre tribe shook the valley. Before anyone knew what was happening, the tribe had blown through the dwarven outer defenses and were upon the main force of elves. As he hewed an elvish knight in two, Orag thought, "It is a good day to be an ogre." Hi everyone, Matiram here again with another narrative battle report for you. Tonight we have the Elves of Port Vicor up against the Ogres. So we are playing a 2,000 point Occupy scenario where you can see the red tokens towards the center there. Those are the secondary objectives. The primary objectives, one is on that central hill, actually right under one of the elf units. The other one is on this little rock in the back. It's the white token that is behind the ogre's line. So for those not familiar with the Occupy scenario, at the end of the game, control of the red tokens gets you 1 point each. Control of the white token in your opponent's deployment zone gets you 2 points. Control of the white one in your own zone is worth nothing. So let's go ahead and get started with the Elvish deployment. Okay, starting on the left, we have a unit of Stormwind Cavalry with the Fog. Then we have a unit of Palace Guard with the Brew of Strength. Up on the hill, we have a troop of Kindred Archers with the Piercing Arrow. Directly behind them is an Elvish Mage on a horse with Fireball and Lightning Bolt. Then there is a horde of Therenian Sea Guard with the Brew of Sharpness. Behind them is the Dragon Kindred Lord with the Boots of Levitation. And next to that is his Army Standard Bearer with the Kaaba's Holy Hand Grenade. Then there is a second troop of Kindred Archers with Dwarven Ale. Over in the forest, we have 2 Bolt Throwers. And on the far end, we have a second regiment of Stormwind Cavalry, and these have Potion of the Caterpillar. Okay, so on my side, I decided to pack everything up very tight, and I'm trying for like a 2-tier approach. Starting on the right here, I have a horde of hunters with the Brew of Courage. Next is a regiment of Berserker Braves. Behind that is a horde of Berserker Braves. Then there is a horde of Boomers. Behind the horde of Boomers from right to left, we have my Army Standard with the Banner of the Griffin. In the center, we have my Warlock, who has Fireball and the Fenulian Amulet. And then we have my Warlord, who has the Gem of Scrying. Next, we have another regiment of Berserker Braves, and behind that is another horde of Berserker Braves. The idea being I don't have a lot of shooting here, but I can essentially use those bunched up Berserker Braves to empower my Warlock a little bit. The idea being I got kind of these more throwaway units to stop his charges, and then I can counter with the hordes is the idea. And 2 more things over here on the other side of the house. I have a second Army Standard. This one is mounted on a chariot, and he has Kaaba's Holy Hand Grenades. And then I have a Mammoth. Okay, so going into turn 1, my opponent wins the turn, decides to bring up his knights on the side. I think he realizes he's got nothing really to fear here. I don't have a lot of good ways to shoot them off the board before they get into me. His Dragon Lord moves a little weird because for some reason he wasn't treating it as if it was a flyer, so he just walked it instead of coming up over his lines. So not sure where that came from, but other than that, he doesn't really need to move much on this flank. Over here, he comes out cautiously. He doesn't want to give me any easy charges, but wants to get good coverage over the field where I have to come. My big problem, and I'm kind of noticing this now, is, well, I noticed it pretty much immediately when I started playing, is this fence that you see in the bottom corner here is going to cause me all sorts of problems. I really packed myself too close to it, and it's not going to let me charge, or not going to let me at the double, which is going to make me be not nearly as aggressive as I think I need to be in the face of all this shooting. And there is a lot of shooting, so he is going to open up on my poor boomers and let loose with 6 wounds there. And that's pretty much it. So we go to my turn 1, and at this point I'm stuck behind the fence. I don't want to really push up too hard with anything else because there's nothing else I can really do. If I leave the stuff behind the fence, it's going to make my line all wonky and give him the chance to get some flank charges, and I don't really want to do that. I'm hoping to, with the hunters there, to get him to charge them. I'm hoping that Ensnare will help me there because I don't really have another answer to them. And over here, I think I made another mistake. I didn't want to kind of serve up my mammoth to him. So I backed it up, and I came up with the army standard on a chariot so I could use the Kaaba's hand grenade and try and do some wounds. What I should have probably done in hindsight is move the mammoth up so that he had no choice but to go over the fence to charge it. Then he would have lost out on his thunderous charge, and I think I would have been better protected than leaving the mammoth essentially out of things, which is what I did here. So I throw a lightning bolt at these elves on the hill and do pretty good. I put 4 wounds on them and then roll high enough to waver them. So it's at least a little less shooting I'm going to have to deal with next turn. And then we go to my opponent's turn, and he just side shuffles his knights so that he doesn't have to go over the terrain when he comes after my mammoth. So that was very smart on his behalf. And then he moves out his mage here so he can get some lightning bolt action on. Over here, a little blurry picture, but I don't think that he does anything. I think I just took this picture to show he's not moving there. And then he keeps the dragon coming over here. I think he wants to bring a pretty overwhelming force on my flank here, and he's definitely got the tools to do it, so I'm kind of nervous. And then during his shooting, he unloads another 7 wounds onto the boomers and routs them, so that's no good whatsoever. And he also gets some extra wounds over here. The 2 bolt throwers just open up on the hunters and throw 9 wounds on top of them, but he rolls badly and they neither waver nor rout. He also gets 1 wound on the berserker unit up front. So I go next, and I can't charge him, so I just kind of ease up a little and get within charge. So he's going to have to charge me this turn, or I've got him next turn, and that's about it. Over here, I decide to advance pretty much as strong as I can, given my issues with not being able to march. So that's kind of annoying. I also realize now, looking at the picture, and I didn't realize this when we were playing, I'm actually probably a little too close with my characters there. I don't think I've got an inch between that army standard bearer and either of those berserker units, so I probably should have spread out. But I don't think it's going to help or hinder me in the long run. And over here, I realize kind of what I've done, and I've kind of ruined my chances to make the knights hindered, so I'm just going to have to throw the mammoth up, hope it survives, and can come back and hurt him. Over here, I open up with another lightning bolt, get a few more wounds on the archers, and actually manage to rout them. So 1-to-1 units but though I think I've lost far more than I've taken at this point, and I'm not really sure what to do. I throw the Kaba's hand grenade, get 3 wounds off on his knights. And then he goes and things go badly. He charges into me with his knights. He also flies the dragon over with his boots. He can march the dragon and still breath weapon it. So yeah, he's gonna just try to go from all sorts of behind on me with the ogres. And the problem is I just don't have an answer in this army to anything this maneuverable. I made a really kind of in the flavor of what I was aiming for the narrative. I made a kind of one-note army and then didn't play it aggressively to actually succeed at the note I made it for. So I really think I'm going to suffer here from the dragon just kind of running willy-nilly through my backfield. Over here, he charges his palace guard into my first unit of berserkers. And he charges his knights into the mammoth. In his shooting, he does, what is that, 14, so 13 wounds to the first rank of berserkers and blows them to Kingdom Come. You also see he ends up doing 4 wounds to the army standard bearer and 5 to the rear berserker unit from the breath weapon. So he was just hurting me bad. Luckily, neither the army standard or the berserker unit broke, so I'm okay there. The big problem is that this terrain really kind of aided my opponent. There's not really a lot of blocking. Well, there's not really any blocking in the center. So between that and my very bad deployment, he's pretty much got me in a shooting gallery. Yeah, Ensnare did not help at all. The hunters get brutalized by his knights, and they turn to face the center of the board. And his palace guard does 9 wounds to the palace guard, or to the berserkers, and they die. And then he turns here because he's basically afraid of my berserkers potentially getting flank charges, so he just wants to face them head on. And over here he does 8 wounds to the mammoth and manages to waver it. So that's bad. The mammoth's probably dead if he gets another charge into it. So I decide I need to get into combat because at this point it's the safest place to be. I run my army standard ahead so he can get out of the way for the flank charge by the Berserker Braves and my Warlord into the Palace Guard. I go ahead and charge the horde of Berserkers into the front. I know they're hindered, but at this point it's more getting them into combat so they can't be the target of shooting than actually attempting to accomplish anything. I make it so that my Warlock is facing the threats that are oncoming. Hopefully some magic can put some hurting on them. And then I decide to go into the flank of his knights with my chariot. I know they're hindered, but I'm hoping to get 1 wound, and maybe with the brutal and the wound I can waver them and hold them off for a round so that my mammoth can recover. And boy, does that not work. I get 0 wounds through. I only needed 1 to force the test and just didn't get it, so I bounce off. And those knights are absolutely free to do whatever the hell they want to do. Needless to say, over here, the 2 hordes of Berserker Braves just absolutely demolish the Palace Guard, and I turn around here. Now, the big problem that I did here is that I just turned them essentially completely facing the right. And this is problematic because he's still got the dragon over there, so he can get over to this side, and I just didn't do anything to cover it. In hindsight, what I probably should have done is turned the bottommost unit of Berserkers so that they could kind of see that the bottom area there on the other side of the fence, so that I might have at least given him some pause on flying his dragon over there. But that just flat didn't happen. And during her turn, that's exactly what he does. He flies the dragon over here and gets it so that he's going to throw fire all on my berserkers, and he charges the knights back into the mammoth. He also brings his wizard around back so he can start throwing some more fire. He starts bringing up his knights slowly. He's got caterpillars, so he didn't care about that water. He's just going to kind of pick his fights there. And his archers and everything just turn. The one plus side here is that if my stuff survives and I can get the flagger or the army standard out of the way, I actually can see the corner of that archer horde with my berserkers because they're so freaking long. We did the laser and it's like millimeters, but I can actually see them around the hill. So I should be able to charge and go get them and again stay out of shooting areas. Then shit goes wrong. He ends up putting a few more wounds on the army standard and succeeds in wavering them. So he's not going to be able to participate in the charge to get out of the way. Only plus side is after I looked at it, he can back up because the retreat option is one of the things you can do when you're hindered or wavered. And that should still give me enough room to get by and go in there on his archers. Then he just did some pain. I think the lightning bolt from, or the fire breath, whichever one from his mage burns these berserkers. So they're at a total of 8. So they're pretty weak. I did succeed. I think it was last turn. I did succeed in putting 1 wound on his dragon, but it's nothing. And these knights absolutely demolish the mammoth and turn to face my army standard on the chariot. So we go to my turn and it's time to go for it. I end up getting the charge. I had to back up with the flag. I had to charge with the one berserker unit and I just spun the other one around. Mainly because I didn't want to take either the dragon in the flank or the knights in the rear, so I kind of turned like you see there, and then I sent the warlock back around, hopefully to throw some magic at the dragon and do something. I bring my warlord close to kind of threaten his knights. The other thing that's nice is that because none of my characters are actually individuals, I can claim the points with them, or the tokens with them. So having them there might mean I can claim this middle one if I can do something to get rid of these knights. And blurry here, but I end up moving around with the chariot guy to throw the hand grenade at the dragon as well. And between the magic and the hand grenade, I only put 2 more wounds on the dragon and can't manage to waver the damn thing. On the plus side, though, the berserkers really show what they're made of. And they're looking at, what is that, 12, 15 wounds on the horde, and I break them. I reform like this so that I can be within 3 inches of my token. So I'm doing okay as far as claiming the scenario objectives goes. But there's still a decent amount of the game left, and now it's just can I stay alive to get these points? And then his knights turn around and leave. I'm not entirely sure why he did this. I don't know if his plan at this point is to come around and threaten my ogres that are on the hill, but it just seemed like kind of a weird choice to me personally. And then his turn, he ends up charging my ogres on the hill with his knights. I know it doesn't look like it, but we just can't get them to balance right, but they're in combat there. He charges the rear or the flank of my army standard bearer with his dragon lord, and he's just not going to survive that. My only hope here is that by them doing that, it leaves my warlord to claim this middle token. And yeah, during shooting, he puts 5 wounds on my warlord with his siege weapons, and then his dragon just eats my army standard bearer. And then his knights just eat my ogre berserkers. So he did a bunch of wounds. I think he did something like another 8 or 9 wounds, and they already had 8 wounds on them, so they went away. And then he turns here to go after my warlord, and this is really, really bad news at this point. So my turn, all I can really do is turn around and get ready to take the inevitable charge and position myself to throw a little bit more magic. I also move here so that he can't charge my knights. What my hope is essentially to draw off this shooting. If he can't kill me and moves on with his knights to go deal with my other unit, I'll be able to back up and try and claim the red token. Get at least 1 point. During magic, I get 2 more wounds off on his dragon, but I'm not rolling high enough to waver him, so it might as well be nothing. And then his turn, he moves some stuff. I'll show what he moved here in a minute, I think. I guess I took a picture. I forgot to take a picture of it. But then he opens up with a lot of shooting. So my warlord is on, 13 wounds. And then he rolls like garbage and only wavers him. And yeah, here he did charge my berserkers with his knights and came over to fire breath the flagger, because the flagger is sitting right on top of that token. He gets 6 wounds on the army standard and doesn't break him or waver him. But then his knights absolutely destroy my berserkers, and he tries to overrun and does not get enough to get within 3 inches. Now the fun part about this is top of 6. So as it stands, if we don't get a turn 7, he is actually losing the game right now. He's outside of 3. He's at, I've got 1 token here. So at this point, if I do nothing on my turn and we don't get a turn 7, I'll win 1-0. But if we do get a turn 7, he's almost certainly going to wipe me completely off the board. I do decide during my turn to back up because I'm wavered. It does get me within 3 inches of the edge of this token, which actually should be, it got nudged. It should be right where the crossover of the 2 folds there should be, but I'm right within 3 inches of it. So now I'm claiming 2 points to his 0. And really what it's going to come down to is, do we get a turn 7? Okay, this shows I do take some shots here at his knights, and I think I inflict 1 wound on the knights. Yep, there it is, the 1 wound, and that's pretty much my end of turn 6. So the turn roll 7 is next. "Hold!" Thal called out, landing the black-scaled beast behind the last of the ogre's leaders. The beast growled deeply, embers escaping its deep black lips as the king reeled it back. Looking over his men, he motioned for them to halt. Giving an appraising view to the battlefield, he counted the wounded and the dead. "Your forces have done well to force me to the field, ogre, and I am tempted to allow you to have this camp." Sheathing his sword, he dropped from the dragon and outstretched a hand. "I am King Thal Victus, and while I am mildly annoyed at your trespass, I am willing to settle things with a compromise." The king paused, watching his dragon fly off to follow the scent of some nearby meal. "I will allow your force to live, to hold my encampment, and I will even be willing to pay you a handsome sum. But you will work for me and fight who I tell you. But fear not. You shall have all the fighting and the gold you can handle. And if you agree to these terms, I have already prepared your first target. His hand still outstretched, Thal awaited the ogre's answer. So, as I assume you all recognize, there was no turn 7, and this actually turned into a weird victory for the Ogres, purely by scenario. I won 2-0, and I did not deserve this win. I got outplayed from turn 1. Really, all it came down to was that by about turn 5, I realized that my opponent had kind of gotten distracted by just whipping my ass and seemed to have forgotten the actual victory conditions of the scenario. So by about turn 5, I was just like, I just need to survive just long enough to get what I needed to claim the victory. The other big issue is it would have been a draw had my opponent rolled higher than a 2 on his overrun after he killed the berserkers with the knights there in the middle, because then he would have claimed that token, and at least then it would have been a tie. But yeah, it was just bad play on my part up to that frankly very weaselly means of stealing the victory. But it does go to show you how absolutely crucial paying attention to the scenario is, because in really every other measure of victory, I should have lost this one so bad. My opponent made a couple of strange decisions. I think mainly with that second unit of knights that's at the top left. If he had, after killing the mammoth, he could have kept going with them and come around the back of the house, and by turn 6 could have ended claiming the white token that's in the back, which was the one that would have given him 2. And then, again, if everything else had worked out the same, it would have been a tie, or if he had gotten close enough to one of the other tokens, it would have been a victory for him. So, as far as what I did wrong, I think it started at list design and kept going from there. I wanted to try and do all these Berserker Braves, which could have been cool had I not just absolutely mangled my deployment. I really should have deployed more in the open space, made use of that, and been far more aggressive. If I was going to use the Army Standard Bearer on the Chariot, I should have actually used him to go hunting those war machines. Worst case scenario, they would have had to turn and waste shots on him, and it would have saved my boomers. And I don't know. I just, like, there's just a lot wrong there. I think I really got spanked for not putting in enough shooting, particularly given how shooting heavy my opponent's list is. And essentially the scenario, or the terrain we had, being very flat in the middle, really turned that center into a shooting gallery. And there really wasn't any way for me to make that any better without going after the guns in the top corner, which I really should have done. I also may rethink doing the actual boomers and use them as crossbowmen instead. I think the shooting would be better, because I really think you have to run across the field too much to get the breath weapon attacks of the boomers to do much. So that could be problematic. I also what I should have done is use the boomers to anchor the right side, and essentially had his knights have to come to them, and I could have shot them up pretty good while that was going on. But all in all, it was a lot of mistakes on my part, but the game was still very fun, super intense, and while it still is a win for me, it's one that I take no pride in, because I failed every opportunity here. But hope you guys enjoyed this one. It's nice to see that the Elven player decided to extend vassaldom to the Ogres after nearly killing them all. So we'll see where the story goes from here. But if you guys have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. Otherwise, we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks.